What happens when tragedy strikes a family already shaped by turmoil? Princess Cecilie of Greece and Denmark, Prince Philip's sister, lived a life of privilege intertwined with pain, her journey marked by resilience and heartbreak. Her untimely death in a 1937 plane crash profoundly impacted her family, especially a young Prince Philip, shaping his views on duty and family. Born into a royal family grappling with political upheaval and exile, Cecilia's life was far from the fairy tale often associated with aristocracy. From devoted wife and mother to her tragic end, her story reflects strength amid adversity and the vulnerabilities of privilege. Cecilia's death left a lasting imprint on her youngest sibling, influencing his legacy. How did this loss shape Prince Philip's character? What does Cecilia's story reveal about resilience in the face of loss? And how has her legacy been reimagined in modern portrayals? Let's uncover the life and enduring influence of Princess Cecilia. In the early 20th century, the Greek royal family was a symbol of both grandeur and fragility, navigating a tumultuous Europe rife with political upheaval. Born into this intricate web of aristocracy and uncertainty, Princess Cecilie of Greece and Denmark came into the world on June 22, 1911, at the royal estate in Tatoi, near Athens. The third daughter of Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark and Princess Alice of Battenberg, Cecilia grew up surrounded by the privilege of royal life. However, beneath the surface of opulent balls and stately dinners lay the ever-present specter of instability that would shape her life and ultimately her tragic end. Cecilia's childhood unfolded against a backdrop of profound national and international change. In Greece, the monarchy struggled to maintain its footing amid shifting tides of political power. Cecilia's father, Prince Andrew, played a central role in military affairs, yet his position offered little protection from the volatile forces at play. The defeat of Greece in the Greco-Turkish War of 1921 to 1922 proved disastrous for the royal family. Accused of military incompetence, Prince Andrew was arrested and sentenced to death, only to be saved by the intervention of foreign powers, notably Britain's King George V. The family was exiled from Greece, leaving Cecilia, her parents, and her siblings adrift in Europe. Exile for the family meant a life of uncertainty and constant movement. They initially settled in Paris, where Cecilia and her siblings, including the youngest, Prince Philip, later consort to Queen Elizabeth II, lived under reduced circumstances. Philip, a mere infant during the family's exile, would grow up shaped by these formative years of displacement. The siblings shared a close bond, their unity forged in part by the challenges of their itinerant existence and the absence of their parents' steady presence. Their mother, Princess Alice, endured severe mental health struggles during this period, diagnosed with schizophrenia and institutionalized for much of Philip's childhood. Their father, meanwhile, withdrew emotionally and physically, residing separately in Monte Carlo. Despite these difficulties, Cecilia blossomed into a poised and graceful young woman. Her aristocratic lineage and striking beauty drew the attention of European nobility. In 1931, she married Georg Donatus, hereditary Grand Duke of Hesse, in a union that marked a new chapter in her life. The marriage brought Cecilia into the Hesse family, one of the most prominent and influential houses of German nobility. She and Georg Donatus shared a deep affection for one another, and together they built a family, welcoming 3 children, Ludwig, Alexander, and Johanna, into their lives. As Cecilia settled into her new role as the Duchess of Hesse, Europe was changing rapidly around her. The rise of the Nazi Party in Germany brought with it both opportunities and complications for aristocratic families like the Hesses. In May 1937, both Cecilia and her husband joined the Nazi Party, a decision that reflected the political pressures and shifting loyalties of the time. This association has since cast a shadow over their legacy, complicating the narrative of their lives. By the mid-1930s, Cecilia appeared to embody the image of a dutiful wife and mother. Her life, however, was not without its challenges. Raising children while navigating the responsibilities of nobility demanded much of her, and the political climate in Germany added another layer of tension. Still, Cecilia remained close to her siblings, particularly Philip, who often visited her and her family. These moments of connection provided Philip with a sense of belonging amid his otherwise transient and tumultuous youth. November 1937 marked a pivotal and heartbreaking turning point for Cecilia and her family. As the year drew to a close, the Hesse family prepared for a joyous occasion, the wedding of Georg's younger brother, Prince Ludwig, to Margaret Campbell Geddes. The nuptials were set to take place in London, and the entire family, including Cecilia, her husband, their two sons, and her mother-in-law, Grand Duchess Eleanor, planned to attend. Cecilia, pregnant with her fourth child, was determined to be present for the event despite the physical challenges of late pregnancy. The journey from Darmstadt, Germany to London required a flight across much of Western Europe, a trip that carried inherent risks in the unpredictable weather of late autumn. On November 16, 1937, Cecilia, her family, and their nanny boarded a plane bound for London. It was a day that began with anticipation and excitement, but one that would end in unimaginable tragedy. The weather on the morning of November 16, 1937, was characteristically autumnal, cool, overcast, and laden with the kind of unpredictable fog that often blanketed much of Western Europe. As Princess Cecilia, heavily pregnant, boarded the aircraft with her family, the journey was meant to be a celebration. The Hesse family had long been looking forward to the wedding of Georg's younger brother, Prince Ludwig, to Margaret Campbell Geddes. While the event promised to reunite friends and family, it also symbolized a rare moment of joy amidst the increasingly tense political climate of the late 1930s. The Junkers Ju-52 aircraft was state-of-the-art for its time, designed for comfort and efficiency, and often used for such occasions by European elites. Cecilia, her husband Georg, their two sons Ludwig and Alexander, and their mother-in-law, Grand Duchess Eleanor, were joined by the children's nanny and a small flight crew. The flight departed from Darmstadt, Germany, bound for London, carrying not only the anticipation of the wedding but also the weight of Cecilia's advanced pregnancy. Her decision to travel, even under such conditions, highlighted the strong bonds within the family and their commitment to supporting one another during important milestones. As the plane gained altitude, the atmosphere within the cabin was likely one of mixed emotions. Excitement for the upcoming nuptials tempered by the discomfort Cecilia might have felt in her condition. Her pregnancy added a layer of complexity to the journey, but the family remained optimistic. They had undertaken such flights before, and there was no reason to expect that this one would be any different. The initial part of the journey was uneventful, with the aircraft soaring steadily above the clouds. However, as the flight neared Belgium, the weather began to deteriorate. Thick fog enveloped the region, obscuring visibility and making navigation increasingly difficult. The crew, experienced though they were, found themselves relying heavily on instruments and radio communication to determine their position and approach. Such conditions were far from ideal but not entirely uncommon for the time. As they approached Ostend, Belgium, the pilot attempted an unplanned descent, possibly seeking clearer visibility or responding to an in-flight emergency. Investigators would later speculate that Cecilia, seated near the front of the aircraft, may have gone into premature labor. This theory was supported by the discovery of a newborn's body among the wreckage, a heart-wrenching detail that underscored the unimaginable tragedy of the situation. If true, the pilot's decision to attempt an emergency landing was likely motivated by concern for Cecilia and her unborn child. Descending through the dense fog, the plane came perilously close to the ground. In the final moments of the flight, the aircraft struck a factory chimney near Ostend. The impact was catastrophic. The plane broke apart as it collided with the structure, tumbling to the ground in a fiery wreck. By the time emergency responders arrived, it was clear there were no survivors. The scene was devastating: twisted metal, scattered debris, and the remnants of lives that had been so full of promise. News of the crash spread quickly across Europe, leaving both the German and Greek royal families in profound shock. The timing of the tragedy, just days before Prince Ludwig's wedding, cast a shadow over what was meant to be a joyous occasion. For the Hesse family, the loss was beyond comprehension. Cecilia, her husband, two of their children, and their mother-in-law were all gone in an instant. The family's youngest daughter, Johanna, who had remained behind due to her young age, became the sole surviving member of their immediate family. In the aftermath, the wedding proceeded as planned, though it was drastically scaled back to a private ceremony. The focus shifted from celebration to mourning, as attendees gathered not only to witness the union of Prince Ludwig and Margaret, but also to honor the memory of those who had perished. Cecilia and her family were later laid to rest in Darmstadt, Germany, their final resting place a solemn reminder of lives cut tragically short. For Prince Philip, who was just 16 years old at the time, the loss of his sister was a devastating blow. Cecilia had been a figure of warmth and stability in his otherwise turbulent childhood. Her death, along with that of her family, compounded the sense of displacement and loss he had already endured. Philip traveled to Darmstadt for the funeral, joining other members of the Greek and German royal families in a somber procession. The young prince's stoic demeanor belied the depth of his grief, a quality that would come to define his public persona in later years. While the tragedy of Cecilia's death was a deeply personal loss for Philip, it also served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, particularly during an era marked by political unrest and technological limitations. The plane crash not only shattered a family, but also underscored the perils of air travel in its early days, when navigation was still a developing science, and weather conditions could prove fatal. As the funeral concluded and the mourners began to disperse, the echoes of the tragedy lingered. For Philip, the experience of saying goodbye to his sister was a pivotal moment in his young life, one that would resonate in the years to come as he navigated his own path through loss, responsibility, and resilience. The grief that followed the plane crash cast a long shadow over the royal families of Europe. For those who knew Princess Cecilia and her family, the tragedy was not just a loss, but a shattering of a bond that had brought warmth and unity to an otherwise turbulent era. For Prince Philip, then a teenager, the funeral in Darmstadt was an initiation into the harsh realities of life and death. It was not the first tragedy he had witnessed, but it was perhaps the most personal and devastating. In the days following the crash, the solemn procession that accompanied Cecilia's funeral was a somber reminder of the fragility of life, even for those born into privilege. Royal dignitaries from across Europe gathered to pay their respects, offering condolences to the grieving Hesse family. The once joyous plans for Prince Ludwig's wedding had been stripped of their grandeur, replaced by a ceremony steeped in grief. Though the nuptials proceeded the day after the crash, they were overshadowed by the pall of mourning that hung over the event. For young Philip, the tragedy reinforced a stoic resolve that would come to define him in later years. At just 16, he stood among the mourners, his face etched with the quiet determination that had already begun to take root in his character. The loss of Cecilia, someone he had known as a source of comfort and familial stability, was a cruel reminder of the instability that had marked his life from the very beginning. Philip's childhood had already been punctuated by upheaval and separation. With his family exiled from Greece and his parents' relationship fractured, he had spent much of his early life moving between countries, schools, and relatives. Cecilia, in her role as a sister and confidant, had offered him a sense of grounding amid the chaos. Her death, along with that of her family, left a void that would never truly be filled. The tragedy also served as a stark illustration of the complexities of royal life in the 20th century. While the public often viewed royals as figures of stability and grandeur, their personal lives were far from insulated from hardship. Cecilia's death, occurring in such dramatic and public circumstances, brought an unwelcome spotlight to her family's grief. It was a poignant reminder that even the most privileged lives could be touched by profound sorrow. In the years that followed, Philip rarely spoke of the loss. His silence on the matter mirrored the stiff upper lip ethos that was so deeply ingrained in the British and European aristocracy. This attitude, characterized by emotional restraint and a focus on duty above all else, became a hallmark of Philip's public persona. It was a coping mechanism as much as it was a reflection of his upbringing, allowing him to navigate the responsibilities and scrutiny that came with his royal role. But while outwardly stoic, the scars left by the tragedy were indelible. The death of Cecilia and her family coincided with a period of significant change in Philip's life. In the late 1930s, he began attending Gordonstoun School in Scotland, a rigorous institution that emphasized discipline and resilience. The school's philosophy aligned closely with Philip's own developing ethos, providing a framework through which he could channel his grief and energy. Gordonstoun's headmaster, Kurt Hahn, was a profound influence on Philip during these formative years. Han's teachings emphasize the importance of overcoming adversity, both physical and emotional, to build character. For Philip, who had already experienced more than his fair share of challenges, this philosophy resonated deeply. The structure and rigor of the school allowed him to focus on his studies and extracurricular activities, forging a path forward in the wake of personal loss. The death of Cecilia also shaped Philip's understanding of responsibility and family. As the youngest of his siblings, he had often relied on his older sisters for guidance and support. With Cecilia gone, Philip increasingly looked to himself to fulfill the roles of stability and leadership within his fractured family. These qualities would later serve him well as he stepped into the global spotlight as consort to Queen Elizabeth II. While Cecilia's death was a deeply personal tragedy for Philip, it also had broader implications for the royal families of Europe. The crash underscored the inherent risks of modern technology and the vulnerabilities of even the most privileged. Air travel, still in its early stages of development, had opened new possibilities for connection and convenience. But it had also introduced unprecedented dangers. The crash of the Junkers Ju-52 was a stark reminder that progress often came with a cost. Even decades later, the memory of Cecilia and her family's tragic end remains a poignant chapter in royal history. Their story is a testament to the fragility of life and the resilience of those who endure its trials. For Philip, it was a defining moment, one that shaped his character and influenced the way he approached the challenges of his own life. While the world would come to know him as a figure of strength and dedication, the events of November 1937 revealed the depths of his humanity. In the aftermath of the tragedy, life moved forward, as it always does, but not without leaving deep imprints on those left behind. For Prince Philip, the loss of Princess Cecilia and her family was not merely a fleeting sorrow. It became a part of the foundation upon which his resilience and sense of duty were built. The lessons he took from this experience shaped the man who would later become consort to one of the most iconic monarchs in history. Philip's ability to adapt to such a profound loss was, in part, a product of his already turbulent upbringing. By the time Cecilia died, Philip had faced more challenges than most would encounter in a lifetime. His childhood had been marked by upheaval, exile from Greece as an infant, separation from his parents, and the emotional distance that came with their struggles. Cecilia's death, while devastating, became another chapter in a life that had taught him to cope with adversity by looking forward rather than back. The late 1930s marked a turning point not only for Philip but also for the world. Europe was teetering on the brink of war, and the tension was palpable across every royal household. For Philip, the years that followed Cecilia's death were ones of growth, self-discovery, and preparation for the responsibilities that would later define his role. His time at Gordonstoun School instilled in him a sense of discipline and a belief in the importance of resilience, qualities that would serve him well during the Second World War and beyond. As war broke out in 1939, Philip, like so many others of his generation, found himself thrust into a world of conflict. Joining the Royal Navy, he quickly demonstrated his aptitude and dedication, rising through the ranks and earning respect for his skill and leadership. His experiences during the war, commanding ships, enduring battles, and witnessing the devastation wrought by global conflict, further solidified his character. The war years also deepened his understanding of sacrifice and duty, values that had been reinforced by the tragedies of his youth, including the loss of Cecilia. The shadow of Cecilia's death loomed large over Philip's early adulthood, influencing not only his personal outlook but also the relationships he built. His eventual courtship of Princess Elizabeth was rooted in shared values of service, resilience, and a strong sense of responsibility. For Elizabeth, Philip's steadfast nature and ability to endure hardship made him an ideal partner. For Philip, Elizabeth represented stability and a connection to a future where he could channel his strengths into a purpose greater than himself. Yet even as Philip embarked on his new life as the consort to the Queen, the memories of Cecilia and her family remained close to his heart. Her death had not only shaped his understanding of personal loss, but also provided a lens through which he viewed the responsibilities of royal life. As he navigated the public and private demands of his role, he often drew on the lessons of his past to guide his actions. The resilience he had developed in the wake of Cecilia's death became one of his most defining traits, enabling him to handle the pressures of royal duty with grace and determination. Cecilia's story, however, was not confined to the memories of those who knew her. Decades after her death, her life and the circumstances of her passing became the subject of renewed interest, particularly in popular media. The Netflix series The Crown dramatized aspects of her story, weaving her tragic death into its narrative of royal family dynamics. While the show brought Cecilia's life to the attention of a new generation, it also introduced inaccuracies that muddied the waters of historical truth. In one episode, The Crown suggested that Prince Philip bore some responsibility for Cecilia's death, portraying her decision to board the ill-fated flight as a consequence of his actions. This narrative, while dramatic, has been debunked by historians and royal biographers. Cecilia's attendance at Prince Ludwig's wedding was a planned family event, and her tragic death was the result of unforeseeable circumstances. The portrayal in The Crown highlighted the tension between historical accuracy and dramatic storytelling, sparking debates about the ethics of fictionalizing real-life events. For Philip, who had spent a lifetime adhering to the ethos of just getting on with it, such dramatizations likely served as a reminder of the complexities of public life. The resilience he had cultivated over the years allowed him to navigate the scrutiny that came with being a member of the royal family, even when it extended to the reinterpretation of his past. Despite the embellishments of media narratives, the core of Cecilia's story remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the strength required to endure its challenges. Her legacy, intertwined with Philip's own, is one of profound loss, but also of the resilience that can arise from such adversity. As Philip reflected on his life, it was clear that the events of November 1937 had left an indelible mark, not as a burden, but as a testament to the power of perseverance. The world that Philip and Cecilia inhabited has long since changed, yet the lessons of their lives continue to resonate. In the face of tragedy, they exemplified the strength to move forward, not by forgetting the past, but by carrying its lessons into the future. For Philip, Cecilia's memory was not just a source of sorrow, but also a wellspring of inspiration, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can endure. As the decades passed, the tragedy of Princess Cecilia and her family became one of many stories consigned to the annals of royal history. Yet, for those closest to the events, the loss never truly faded. Prince Philip, in particular, carried the weight of Cecilia's memory throughout his life. While he rarely spoke publicly about the pain of her passing, those who knew him understood that her death was one of the key moments that shaped his worldview, his character, and his enduring commitment to duty. Philip's stoicism, often perceived as a defining feature of his personality, can be traced back to the losses he endured in his youth. The death of Cecilia and her family was a cruel reminder of the fragility of life, but it also reinforced his belief in the importance of perseverance. For Philip, resilience was not merely a personal trait, but a necessity, a way to navigate the challenges and responsibilities that came with his royal role. This approach to life, one of quiet determination and an unflinching focus on the future, resonated with the British public and the royal family alike. As consort to Queen Elizabeth II, Philip often stood as a stabilizing force, his pragmatism balancing the Queen's steadfast dedication to tradition. Together, they embodied a sense of continuity and endurance that became the hallmark of their reign. While Cecilia's death was a defining moment in Philip's personal history, its legacy extended beyond the immediate family. The tragedy served as a reminder of the vulnerabilities faced even by those in the highest echelons of society. It was a story of love, loss, and resilience, a narrative that continues to captivate historians, royal enthusiasts, and the public at large. In recent years, the resurgence of interest in royal history, spurred by popular media like The Crown, has brought Cecilia's story back into the spotlight. The dramatization of her life and death, while engaging, has often blurred the lines between fact and fiction. For viewers, Cecilia's story was a poignant subplot, a humanizing element in the grand tapestry of royal history. For historians, however, the inaccuracies presented a challenge: how to preserve the truth while acknowledging the dramatic liberties taken for entertainment. Philip himself was famously candid about his indifference to public opinion, but even he could not escape the weight of media portrayals. The suggestion in The Crown that he bore some responsibility for Cecilia's death was a painful misrepresentation of events. Such dramatizations, while compelling, risk distorting the legacy of real people, reducing their lives to narrative devices rather than honoring their full humanity. Beyond the inaccuracies, however, lies a deeper truth about Cecilia's legacy. Her life and untimely death reflect the complex intersections of privilege and vulnerability, duty and personal loss. As a member of the Hesse and Greek royal families, she lived a life of status and expectation, yet her story was marked by the same fragility that defines the human experience. For Prince Philip, Cecilia's memory remained a quiet but enduring influence. It was her warmth, grace, and strength that he carried with him, not just her tragic end. In his later years, as he reflected on his life, Philip often spoke of resilience in simple terms. "You just have to get on with it," he once said, a phrase that encapsulates his approach to both personal and public challenges. The lessons of Cecilia's life and death are not confined to the royal family. They resonate more broadly as a testament to the power of enduring love and the human capacity for resilience. Her story, intertwined with Philip's, is one of profound loss, but also of the strength that can arise from such sorrow. It is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, life continues, shaped by the memories of those we have loved and lost. As the world reflects on the lives of Cecilia and Philip, their legacies endure not just in the history books, but in the hearts of those inspired by their resilience. For Philip, Cecilia was more than a sister. She was a symbol of the enduring connections that define family. Her memory lived on in his actions, his values, and the quiet strength that characterized his remarkable life. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.